Ms. Kuik Shiao Yin.
Mr. Speaker, sir, to prepare for this speech, I talked to young Singaporeans from 18 to 35 years old, students as well as young millennials in our workforce, about what was their own sensing of their future in our country and what they most cared about our country getting right. Their answers were varied and fresh and often very surprising. And I'll admit it can be overwhelming to try to make sense of the conflicting forest of everyone's different answers to the how and what questions about our economy. How should we encourage innovation or tackle inequality? And what is the best way to manage our reserves or the best tax system for us? I find that the questions I keep circling back to, the ones that give me some compass of clear direction to help me navigate my own uncertainty and confusion, are always the questions of who and why. Why do we care about encouraging innovation or give a damn about inequality? Why must we keep such high reserves, and why? Who do our reserves or tax system serve? And at the heart of it all, who are we? Who is not part of our we? And who do we most want to be? Taking the time to slow down from our usual pace in Parliament to dwell on questions of purpose and identity may seem frivolous, but I suggest to you that they are the most crucial questions, because they bring us back into a space of choosing from what matters most to us. I have found that whether we are debating about how we should spend our own personal dollars or the dollars of our nation, the core question we must keep returning back to is, what is the meaning we care to make with all of our money in the first place? Our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of success at things in life that we realized didn't really matter to us at all. So I fully support Finance Minister's wonderful reflection in his speech that a strong economy is not an end in itself. It is a means to build a better home and provide a better quality of life for all our people. So if our economy is a means to an end, then should we not discuss every year at budget whether we as a people still share the same end goals? In my first budget speech in 2015, I shared my hope that our country spent the first 50 years of our history getting rich, and I would love to see us spend our next 50 years charting our course towards becoming truly wealthy. And my desire still stands. So what is this vision of true wealth that we are longing for at the end of all our days of economic hustling? With each year, do we know, and do we care to know, whether we are moving closer to or further away from that end? I find that there is one visionary end state that still resonates for most young Singaporeans across different beliefs and backgrounds, and that's the one that was written down more than half a century ago, which invites us to imagine that there will be a day when we, the citizens of Singapore, would find ourselves as one united people, able to regard each other less by race, language, or religion, and more as fellow builders of a democracy that was based on justice and equality. And we would be happy, truly, surprisingly, profoundly happy, because we had somehow learned that this life we got to live was never about creating prosperity and progress for its own sake, or for the sake of bettering only ourselves, but for the sake of bettering others alongside, because we finally believed we were better together rather than apart as a nation. Sir, the pledge represents our dream of a Singapore as it should be. It is our North Star, an ambitious promise we ask every young student to spend each morning putting their hand on the heart and swear that we will do whatever it takes and take on whatever costs to bring to life this vision. And yet, as each young student ages into a young working professional, many of them feel their idealism for themselves and for the country being challenged at different levels of the Singapore system. And along the line, we sense that the Singapore way is more like a tense high-wire act, where we must learn to calibrate our ideals of communitarianism, democracy, and egalitarianism on one end with the realities of individualism, authoritarianism, and elitism on the other end. And so far, our country has managed to advance forward without falling off the line, and even our critics concede that there is no small feat. But whether our performance has been a gracefully balanced act or one ungracefully tilted too much towards pragmatism has been the fodder of much debate. I've heard it said jokingly that pragmatism is our official religion. And you know, it is certainly part of our cultural DNA when you can hear it not just in the voice of our parents and our policymakers, but in ourselves and our children. The decision to raise GST taxes to 9% has been justified as a pragmatic decision in the face of growing national needs in the future. And the decision to not raise our NIR contributions beyond the 50% mark has also been justified as a pragmatic decision for the sake of signaling to currency markets the strength of our dollar. And a decision to not implement capital gains tax or raise more wealth taxes as yet another alternative has also been justified as a pragmatic decision to maintain our attractiveness as a wealth management hub. And every tilt towards the side of pragmatism is simultaneously a tilt away from the side of our ideals. And I want to stress, I do not presume pragmatism to be bad and idealism to be good. Every healthy individual learns to hold both options in tension within their mental construct and make their hard choices. But I believe that our idealistic young professionals and students who make up both our current and future tax base have the right to question us. When will it ever be the right time to tilt our balance just a little bit more towards our ideals rather than always towards what's pragmatic? And if not now, while we have substantial surpluses, then when? If not later, then are we saying never? I came across an article online called The Limits of Ideology, Lessons from Singapore by an American CEO called Margaret Heffernan. She concluded her article like this: what Singapore holds in reserve is an asset Western leaders would give their eye teeth for, a national surplus accrued over many years of fastidious economic management. How will this wealth be used? And while Western leaders use insolvency as a perennial alibi for their failure to make coherent strategic choices, Singapore's government has the money and the power to effect real change. And should it fail to do so, no politicians in Singapore will be able to claim they didn't see their chance. If with the freedom to spend that most Western leaders lack, Singapore cannot address its problems, then the principles it espouses will be discredited for good. And I get it, she's really cutting, but I can concede that she has a point. Thanks to the prudence of our forefathers, we of all nations indeed have a unique chance right here and right now to set an example once more to the world of how a small nation can effect real change, impacting real people in real time. And this substantial gift is given onto us for a reason, and maybe it holds a meaning larger than our present imagination. So we have quite a first world problem on our hands. Should we spend more to help the people we have with us today, or store more so we can help the people of tomorrow? And it's a hard choice, because both are equally good choices. But it is healthy to ask ourselves, if we notice that we are in the habit of overestimating for our future, could we also be underestimating what we can do in the present? And every reasonable Singaporean believes in protecting our reserves, and I am totally not supportive of any willful call to squander this once-in-a-lifetime inheritance on populist promises and things that don't last. So I agree with Finance Minister's argument that using 100% of the net investment returns is not a good idea, because the principal sum of reserves will stagnate over time, and the NIRC as a share of GDP will consequently fall as our economy grows. But I can also appreciate economist Donald Lowe's perspective, that the current rule of spending only up to 50% of the net investment returns means that the reserves are still growing quite considerably every year. And just because 100% is not prudent doesn't mean 50% is right either. We'd still be adding to the principle of the reserves even if it was at 60%. And the choice is really about whether we believe in growing our reserves faster or slower. So I want to admit, I'm a terrible econ student. So I do need help in making sense of all of this. And I struggle to understand the IMF's surveillance of member states' foreign exchange reserves adequacy, because in the IMF's assessment, they say we are excessively prudent. IMF's opinion is that a good enough amount of reserves would be 27% of our GDP, or $113 billion. I don't know the size of our reserves, but I read that MAS foreign exchange reserves alone are around $369 billion, or 88% of GDP. So that's about 3 times over IMF's recommendation. And I want to stress again, I am not assuming that IMF is right and the government is wrong. I am certainly not saying let's just take whatever a foreign institution says as gospel truth, because I sure as heck don't know enough to make any kind of proper assessment. So I hope, and I think it is helpful for the government to provide a thoughtful and easy to understand response to the IMF's assessment, because it does open up an important and deeply profound question for us to consider. How much then is enough for us? What is this final number we need in our reserves that will make us feel complete and secure? And who would we be prepared to re-examine that number for? When we build up our own family savings, how do we decide when is a good time to tap into it to spend on our children now versus storing it up for them to use for their future children? And we might say, well, that really depends on how urgent are the needs of my children now, isn't it? Is it life or death? Is there a golden opportunity they need to seize on? And we would probably take out a significant percentage of the investment returns of our own savings, while prudently protecting a baseline sum, of course, in a heartbeat. if we believe doing so would make a significant and immediate difference to the well-being of our children in the present, particularly if it would help save their life, because no point saving for their future if they die off in the present, right? It's human to be much more liberal when it comes to spending on our own children and much more conservative when we choose how to spend on other people's children. I deeply admire the government's devotion to long-term strategic overplanning, and I get the deep anxieties we have around underplanning. And I appreciate that we cannot afford to get the math wrong, but we cannot afford to get the meaning under the math wrong either, because the people don't listen to math, they listen to meaning. And if we hope to galvanize the support of the young idealists who make up our future tax base, we have to give them a braver and broader vision that warrants the bigness of our reserves. Otherwise, they can mistake it to be a story that is just about growth of reserves for growth's sake. So I hope that the government can help us understand what is the real story better. Inequality is a deeply emotional issue for many young Singaporeans, and I dare say it's one of the biggest issues that they care about. So now is the time to really go to talk to the new generation of Singapore taxpayers before 2021 hits, and to listen into what really matters to them. The socialist Kuik Shiao Yin's book, This Is What Inequality Looks Like, is sold out, and I have seen dog-eared copies already making their rounds around among thoughtful young Singaporeans, and some of them are buying one copy to keep and another to loan. So, because what she's saying in there about a need to deal with inequality through a systemic lens is resonating and connecting with them. Straits Times journalist Chua Mei-Hong cited that book in her own article, Inequality is a Threat, Name It and Face It, recommending it as a must-read for every politician and civil servant. And I am really glad that the Prime Minister himself is making inequality a critical issue to look at. In his written response to a parliamentary question this month, he said, if widening income inequalities result in a rigid and stratified social system, with each class ignoring the others or pursuing its interests at the expense of others, our politics will turn vicious, our society will fracture, and our nation will wither. A recent IPS study on social capital in Singapore concluded that the sharpest social divisions here may no longer be race or religion, but class. Our youths who have lived in public housing and gone to neighborhood schools and depended on public transport all their lives will say they didn't need an official study to tell them what they have seen for a long time. They can sense-make the class differences in everyday ordinary interactions, because it is the difference they feel at the doorway between the teenager who gets the order from Food Panda and the teenager who rides through the rain to deliver it to him. It is the difference felt by the young intern every lunchtime when she struggles over how to tell her colleagues that she has a very different idea from all of them about what is an affordable place to dine. Even some of our more privileged youths are not comfortable with the growing divide either, and they are driven to do something different about it through the system. They are well acquainted with how much money can buy through tuition classes and college prep coaches and yearly overseas trips and diverse life experiences for someone else in their generation who is taking that same national exam, fighting for that same national trophy and going for the same interviews that they are. They too want to jailbreak this pragmatic arms race of every man for himself meritocracy. The chairman of the PSC, Eddie Teo, made a speech in 2015 where he shared his insights from his yearly interviews with the 350 young people vying for scholarships each year. He said of these potential future public sector leaders that they think critically and question what is happening in Singapore, our socio-economic disparities, our educational policy and system, and our political environment. And when they worry about social inequality and the lack of social mobility, some may have already moved away from that one cardinal belief that our founding fathers had, that social welfare should be discouraged because it breeds a poor work ethic and a dependence on government handouts. They believe that the government should do more for the poor because they feel it is just. So the young recognize the goodness of ad hoc help like SG Bonus, but they're also clear that such help is short-lived and unlikely to create deep satisfaction. The lower income youths welcome the $300, but they know how fast it disappears in a few bill payments. So no once-off voucher can truly soothe the blow of a GST increase that hits them with every transaction on a day-to-day basis. And meanwhile, they know in the land of the rich, many treat the $100 as just chump change. For the short-term and disproportionate impact that they have, ad hoc packages aren't cheap. $700 million is a substantial sum that could have gone into, say, an MSF program that focused on making more significant long-term difference. So are our well-intended ad hoc transfers drawing resources and attention away from dealing with challenges in a more sustained and structured manner? Every year after the A-level results, the media loves highlighting stories of kids who excelled in their exams despite the most challenging of circumstances. And this year I came across a story of a 19-year-old Singaporean girl who grew up under an alcoholic Singaporean father who constantly abused her Indonesian mother. And in primary school, she witnessed her desperate mother attempting suicide. Her parents divorced, and her mother had to take care of her and her brother on a cleaner salary of less than $1,000, the bulk of which went into paying rental for a two-room flat. This girl lived on a daily allowance of $2 and survived on loaves of bread and treats from friends. She studied in school all the time so she could help her mom save on electricity bills. And she recounted that the temptation to join gangs was always present, but she had the presence of mind to ask herself, is this what I really want to be in the future? And is this how I want to define myself? And with the help of a resilient and loving mother, supportive friends and teachers, she ended up not just excelling at the A-levels, but she even joined Meet the People sessions, interned at MSF, did volunteer work, and reconciled with her father. This girl is amazing and she's phenomenal, and she's now looking for a way to fund her university studies. And I share her story to have us first consider not just her amazing achievement, but her mom's achievement as well as an individual beating the odds. But second, I would have us to consider all the multiple points in her story where we would have wanted to know whether the system did come alongside to aid mother and child's heroic journey. Why is it that we recognize this girl's story as an exceptional story rather than a norm? And do we want stories like hers to be more of a norm? And if we do, what are we prepared to do at a systemic level? Can we believe that there are actually more children out there who are capable of having a story like hers if we choose to believe in them and invest more systemic state support to care for parents and children who don't quite fit into our checkboxes of assumed indicators of future success? Do we believe that the child growing up in the worst circumstances has just as much to offer our country as the child who grew up in the best? And I've met children growing up in rental flats with potential to live out very big dreams. A girl whose ambition is to become a criminal lawyer, an articulate boy who learned public speaking because he binge-watched TED videos. And I met a neighborhood school teenager who floored me with his serious conviction that someday he will enter parliament to be, in his own words, a voice for the voiceless. They are there. Singapore children of low-income moms, single moms, and foreign moms, and they are all our children. And they and their mothers are part of the we that we are pledged to serve. So give them the housing and the education and the possibility of rising into positions of power so that they too can play their part in our country's success story. We are a nation struggling with infertility. Why shouldn't we take any and every child born into Singapore with equal honor and belief and blessing? Our young Singaporeans get it that we are a small and vulnerable nation, and they get it that we need a monstrous amount of money just in case a perfect storm of horrors truly hit. And there's so many horrors out there. Sea levels rising, global economy tumbling, silver tsunami, total fertility rate flatlines. I mean, they get it, they've heard it. And we're a nation so well versed with fear as a motivating force. And we have come very, very far in surviving as a country by not ignoring our fears. But it is not the only emotion worth listening into. Fear alone cannot bring us past that space of survival into a space of true thriving. When I live poll young people in JCs, polys, and ITEs about what is that one word they associate with the future of Singapore, do you know what word constantly emerges as the biggest on their word cloud? It is the word uncertain. So yes, I think we have succeeded in ingraining in them the message of our vulnerabilities. They got it. And the emotion of fear, while useful, can become uninspiring and paralyzing as a mood. Our youths are hungry for a new kind of certainty, and that certainty can only come from the promise of a new story, a story of a who and a why that is bigger than the sum of all of our fears about what's and hows. Our youth need to hear the greater story of all the things that we want to do for love, not just fear. And the story needs to come straight from the heart of every leader in the land about all of the meaning that money can buy, not just for ourselves, but for each other. And at some point, we have to discern when to stop just operating in fear that the bottom will fall out of our Singapore story. There is a time for fear, and there also is a time for courage. Courage born from the fire of fighting for our ideals, to simply say in the face of fear that that is enough. We have enough. We are enough. And it is time to let more of us have enough too. And in that space of sufficiency, we shall find our satisfaction.
Ms. Kuik, you have 1 more minute.
I want to state that I see the heart of the finance minister for the people, and I believe in his openness to find new ways forward, and I trust his courage to make hard choices. So my hope is that he and this government can work together with a new generation of idealists and pragmatists to help them dream of a better future that they would all be so very proud to call their own. Thank you.